on some of the stories, some of the ramifications and continuing impacts of both Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget on Friday and, more pertinently, about what's happened to the pound subsequently. Duncan Weldon is an economist and author, former colleague of mine as well, briefly. And he tweeted something. You'll allow me, Duncan, to say that you're not given to overexcitement.
I try not to.
No, so when I see your tweet saying this is literally incredible in response to what is happening in the gilt markets, then I'm concerned. Why? What is literally incredible, and why is it literally incredible?
Yeah, so what's happening out there, all of the attention, much of the attention today has been on these really very dramatic falls in the pound on Friday and again today. I think the bigger and more worrying story about what's happening in financial markets following on from that budget is what's happening to interest rates and in the debt market. So gilts, that's the government's bonds. That's how the government funds itself when it borrows money. So the interest rate on gilts is something to really watch. It tells us, the government is borrowing a lot of money. It kind of matters, how expensive that borrowing is going to be. We saw a really big increase in the interest rate on that debt on Friday. We saw another one today. In fact, back to back, they're the two worst days for the gilt market, the market for British government debt, since at least the 1970s.
Good Lord.
What I said was incredible, was looking at what financial markets now expect the bank to do. Now, I don't think they'll go this far, but right now, financial markets expect the Bank of England to raise interest rates from the 2.25% they're at today to 6% by next March. 6%.
Well, that is unprecedented.
Oh, completely. It's the problem we've got at the moment is, inflation is, it's just below 10%. It's far too high. Some of that is because of, really high global energy prices, but it's not just because of energy prices. The Bank of England think some of that inflation is domestically generated. It's because the jobs market is very tight, because there are more job vacancies than unemployed people. And, the Bank of England is raising interest rates to try and slow the economy, to try and bring inflation down. And what we had on Friday was the Chancellor saying, I'm going to inject £45 billion into the economy through tax cuts and try and speed things up. So we've got the Chancellor stepping on the accelerator whilst the bank is trying to hit the brakes.
They are completely at odds with each other.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on motoring, but I think hitting the accelerator and the brakes at the same time, not usually recommended unless you're a rally driver.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that might be how you do a donut. And this is more important than the currency volatility. Just run us through that again. Why is it more important than the currency volatility?
So, the pound losing, 3% of its value against the dollar last Friday, another percent and a bit today, that matters. It increases the cost of things that we import. Not something you want when inflation's already high. But in the end, for most people and most firms, what's happening with interest rates is going to have a much bigger impact on their finances than what's happening with the pound.
Of course.
If the Bank of England, the problem is the bank was already expected to raise interest rates quite quickly. Because of what the government is doing, it now thinks it needs to go further and faster. That's going to be a really nasty shock for a lot of households if they're coming off a 2-year or a 5-year, fixed mortgage rate. And suddenly, a mortgage that was at, they'd taken out when the Bank of England's base rate was below 1%.
Yeah.
If suddenly looking at 3%, 4%, even 5%, that's a huge hit to their monthly income, completely outweighing the impact of cuts in taxes.
And of course, specifically stamp duty as well. I mean, if you're looking to buy a house and interest rates have rocketed, this cut in stamp duty is barely going to touch the sides.
I would barely touch the sides. Completely. If you look at, if we're looking at interest rates being anywhere near what financial markets are expecting now, then the stamp duty cut's just an irrelevance.
And they're betting on it. It's not just expecting in a sort of academic sense. They are betting on it hitting 6%.
Yes,
that's how the gilts market
works. And that's essentially what So sterling has stopped falling so much this morning. It had a really bad night overnight in the Asian trading. This morning it sort of found a level, a lower level than we're used to, but it's found one. The reason it's found that level is because financial markets now expect big rises in interest rates. If interest rates on the pound is going up, then it's a bit more attractive for foreign investors to hold it. But you're caught in a sort of a really bad position that either the Bank of England is going to raise interest rates to the kind of levels which lots of households, lots of businesses can't cope with,
yes,
which is bad, or it's not going to do that. And if the markets realise it's not going to do that, then the pound starts falling again. So we're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place at the moment.
Can you just for the record, it's a burnout apparently what you described in motoring terms, not a donut as I suggested. Burnout seems quite appropriate in many ways, doesn't it? And I had no idea how many boy racers I had listening to the programme, but they're queuing up to tell me that. Can you conceive, and perhaps I'm tempting you into territory that you won't be comfortable in, but is it possible that this was the plan? I mean, that Kwasi Kwarteng is not sitting in Downing Street feeling alarmed and spooked by what's happened, that this was exactly what was supposed to happen from his point of view?
I think they're going to be spooked. I think they were expecting a bit of sterling weakness. They'll have been expecting a bit of a rise in interest rates, but the extent of the last 2 days, in the Treasury and in Number 10, I think they'll be worried. And my concern is they're going to be worried enough to sort of think, okay, we need to care a bit more about the deficit, but you turning on those tax cuts would just be hugely embarrassing to them. I can't see them doing it. So I worry they're going to try and come out in the next few weeks, few months with a big packet of spending cuts and sort of say, look, this was always the plan. We announced the tax cuts first. Here are the spending cuts. And then you end up with sort of an economy in the worst position imaginable. If you're, cutting spending to, people on welfare who are the most likely to spend it, to fund tax cuts to very rich people who are the most likely to save it, all amidst a backdrop of higher interest rates, a weaker sterling. Speaking to people that have been in the markets on trading floors for a very long time, no one can remember a reaction to a British budget this bad.
Yeah. Okay. We must do this more often. Finally, Andy Bruce at Reuters reports that the 10-year government bond yields are on track for the biggest calendar month rise since at least 1957. That fits in with your analysis of no one being able to remember a reaction being this bad.
Yeah, there aren't many traders out there who were on the trading floor in 57.
No, exactly that. Incredible scenes. Are you scared?
I distinctly nervous. Okay. Would be my distinctly nervous. I mean, there's a lot of talk that the Bank of England is not due to meet again until November. There's a lot of people out there today. A lot of the investment banks are now expecting an emergency move from the Bank of England, a sort of out of schedule hike in interest rates. I'm not sure if we'll get there or not.
Right.
I mean, I worry if they do that, it would just signify panic.
Duncan Weldon, many thanks indeed. I should tell you that Duncan's book, 200 Years of Muddling Through, provides pages upon page of similarly acute and clear analysis of matters economical. So the economist and writer Duncan Weldon there just putting a little bit of perspective, putting into perspective the profundity of what is happening in markets and suggesting that actually the currency volatility is not the big story here. The really big story is the interest that the government is going to have to pay upon the money that it's borrowing, with markets now betting on that hitting 6%. And that, of course, then has ramifications for everything from your credit card to your mortgage to your monthly payments for an HP telly. It's coming up to 12 noon. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm tempted to steer back to that, actually. So apocalyptic are some of the warnings. But we'll touch on another element of what Duncan talks about there. We'll have a look at the immigration story. 3 minutes after 12. Before we get stuck into the next conversation, just another bit of context. So a chap called Paul Donovan is the chief economist at UBS Global Wealth Management. So, I mean, these are the people that really have to know what they're talking about. And he sends out a morning comment I think every day or every Monday, and this is what he had to say today. The global signals from the UK's mini-budget matter. Modern monetary theory has been taken into a corner by the bond markets and beaten up. Advanced economy bond yields are not supposed to soar the way UK gilt yields rose. This also reminds investors that modern politics produces parties that are more extreme than either the voter or the investor consensus. Investors seem inclined to regard the UK Conservative Party as a doomsday cult. I don't think that people like that use language like this ordinarily. A doomsday cult. That's the sort of thing I've been saying for years about this lot. And now you have the chief economist of the UBS Global Wealth Management saying exactly the same thing. That's what I talked about earlier when I was talking about fairies. They honestly just believe that they can somehow believe reality different. They can believe things that don't exist into existence. They can believe things that do exist out of existence. They believe things better. And where did all that begin? Where did we first see politicians of whom we thought we knew better suggesting that you can actually believe your way into a different reality, an alternative reality? Yep, you got it. It was Brexit. And it is to Brexit now that we return, because there is a remarkable story unfolding. It was on the front page of the Sunday Times yesterday, suggesting that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, in their pursuit of growth, will need to see more. I can't believe we're doing this already. Do you remember when we talked about liberty of motion? Do you remember liberty of motion? I said to you that eventually, in order to replace the holes left in our workforce by freedom of movement, they will have to bring back freedom of movement, but give it another name. And that name I suggested would be liberty of motion. I also suggested to you not long ago that eventually so many sectors would have been given a special dispensation to attract foreign workers that we would have liberty of motion in all but name. And of course, the big difference between freedom of movement and liberty of motion is that liberty of motion doesn't apply to you or your children. They will not have freedom to move. And in fact, the people that we will almost be begging to come here are probably going to be offered a form of second-class citizenship anyway, because otherwise they're going to have all sorts of problems with their base. So Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng believe that they need to make changes to the shortage occupations list to recruit more overseas staff. They're also contemplating a loosening of the English language requirement in some sectors. You remember the racist element of Brexit? I just stress again, because I think it is important, even if people persist in misrepresenting you. I think it is important to be clear about this. Not everybody who voted for Brexit was racist, but I'm yet to meet a racist who didn't vote for Brexit. It's a crucial distinction now. There is a big difference between saying everybody that voted for Brexit is racist to saying every racist I've ever met, and God knows I meet a lot, and not as many as I used to, though. But anyway, they all loved Brexit. And you remember Farage talking about people speaking foreign on trains? There it is there. They are talking about loosening the English language requirement in some sectors to enable more foreign workers into the country. And also changes, which I told you would have to happen because I have the privilege of talking to real people every day. You speak to a farmer that can't get his turkeys plucked or his crops picked. What are they going to do? They're going to wait for a new generation of British school leavers to come out of school with a deep ambition to pluck turkeys? I don't know. Maybe that's the plan. But until that happens, who's going to pluck the turkey? I should use a different figure of speech here because I could have a terrible verbal accident if I'm not careful with all this talk of turkey plucking. Crops picking, that's a bit easier. Who's going to pick the crops? You need actual people to pick the crops. Seasonal workers, there's a cap of about 30 to 40,000. Hospitality is going to need something, I think. Everybody in hospitality tells me that they're not operating at full capacity. They've come out of lockdown, desperate to start those wheels turning again, and yet they can't get the bodies. They cannot get the staff to do it. Downing Street sources said the government was not advocating an increase in immigration, but changes to the mix. And there's a quote, that will involve increasing numbers in some areas and decreasing in others. What areas are you going to decrease it in? As the Prime Minister has made clear, we also want to see people who are economically inactive get back into work. So here is the politics of it. I think logic demands that we start trying to attract more people to this country than are currently coming here. Oddly, the numbers suggest that Brexit hasn't actually reduced immigration much. It's just, in a sense, seen people come from countries that are not European anymore. So you remember the calls we used to get from people telling us they were going to vote for Brexit or they supported Brexit because of all the brown faces behind the tills in their local Tesco. They have got the exact opposite of what they said they were voting for. The precise and polar opposite of what they said they were voting for. People told me that they had voted for Brexit because there were too many Muslims in this country, without acknowledging, it would appear, or understanding that there aren't any Muslim countries in the European Union. But we are now attracting people from other countries outside the European Union on a scale that has never been seen before. So that bit has failed, and we still need more. The social care sector needs to fill 105,000 posts. There's a shortfall of 40,000 nurses, at least 100,000 HGV drivers. They stand up in the House of Commons and boast about high employment, boast about full employment. Johnson started it. Truss has continued it. They don't mention the fact that 2 million job vacancies were advertised last month. There are 2 million vacant jobs. And there are very, very few people registered unemployed who want these jobs. People have stepped back from the workplace. They've taken a lifestyle choice. They've changed, and some of them, of course, are very poorly. Some of them are too ill to work, but they still get counted in some of these numbers. So there are two camps now emerging in the Conservative cabinet. On the one side, you've got the people who've just tanked the pound and trashed our economy, saying that we need more immigration. And yet, probably on this occasion, having a point. And then on the other side, you've got the ones who are probably right also when they say, but we're the party of Brexit. We're going to annoy all the racists that voted for Brexit and for us if we actually have to start increasing immigration. Just think about that for a minute. That is a distillation of a country on its knees. Right? The people in power are arguing with each other over immigration because half of them know that they need the racists in order to sustain power, and the other half know that they need foreign workers to come here in order to have a wing and a prayer of the sort of economic growth that the country is in desperate need of. Here's the mad bit. Are you ready for this? I don't think you're ready for this. I think if you're driving, you better pull over or something. Or maybe sit down. Because this is huge. This is one of the maddest things that's ever happened in British politics. Because they're both right. Increase immigration, you will alienate all the racists who propelled Brexit over the line and the Tories into power. Don't get more foreign workers into this country, and you will jeopardise any chance at all of the sort of economic growth that the country needs to see. How mad is that? Just think about how mad that is for a minute. They're both right. So you've got Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman on one side saying no to immigration. We don't want any more immigrants. Don't point out their own family past. That ship has sailed. I think it's relevant. They don't. So, on we go. So you've got that branch of the cabinet arguing against immigration because they are also the ones that call themselves anti-woke, which, as we've established on this programme, quite often means sympathetic to racist sensibilities. So they know that if you actually increase immigration, if these numbers, these visa restrictions come down, then the racists are going to be furious. And the thing you have to remember about racism politically is that it is self-harm. It is self-inflicted damage. It is a bigotry, a prejudice, a hatred that transcends self-interest. You hate that foreign person even more than you care about your own interests or your children's futures. That's why Brexit happened, because you were persuaded, not you personally, but people were persuaded to hate the foreigner, the person speaking a foreign language on a train. The people in Farage's despicable posters, you were persuaded to hate those people, those non-existent mythical people, more than you cared about your own future, your own interests, your own economic welfare. That's how you pull it off. So they are right, Braverman and Badenoch, and to a lesser extent, I think Rees-Mogg, who's sort of wobbling between the two positions. That there it is. They are right. You will alienate a huge swathe of your racist base if you increase immigration, if you change the politics, the policies to make it easier for people to come here from overseas. But on the other hand, Kwarteng and Truss are right, that if you've got 2 million vacancies in an economy that's crying out for growth, and you do not have people here who are prepared to fill those vacancies, then you have to do something to tempt people from somewhere else to come here. So they are right as well. I'm going to level with you. I hadn't worked that out before I started talking. So it's rather shot the fox of whatever question it was that I was intending to ask you. I hadn't realised that they're both right. I mean, in many ways, they're both wrong. But in the clearest way, they're both right. They know they're going to alienate the racist base by increasing immigration. They know they can't possibly generate growth in a country with 2 million job vacancies and nowhere near enough people here to fill them unless they get people in from overseas. So what the hell am I going to ask you now? We've already done our Marvin Gaye topic for the day, haven't we? We've already had our what's going on. It's 14 minutes after 12. I don't know what to ask you. What do you think? Should I say, who's going to win? Who's going to win? Who's going to win? The anti-immigration lot in the current Conservative cabinet or the pro-immigration lot? As a Brexit voter, half of you told me that you just wanted controlled immigration. You didn't care what the overall numbers were. You just wanted more rules and regulations. The other half told me you categorically wanted fewer people to come here. But remember, everybody knew exactly what they were voting for, even as they voted for two completely different things. It was absolutely condescending and outrageous to suggest that there was no earthly way both camps were going to get what they wanted. So there it is. There it is. Braverman and Badenoch are correct. This will alienate racist support. And okay, if you find racism an uncomfortable badge to wear, let's just say anti-immigration then. Of course it will. If you're anti-immigration and they're saying we need more immigration, you're going to be very cross. But Kwarteng and Truss are right as well when they say we're in a country with 2 million job vacancies. If we can't get people to come here from somewhere else, we're never going to have the growth that we keep promising and talking about. I haven't got a topic. Let's see what happens. Okay, the number you need is 0345 6060 973. All right, if you hit the numbers now, you will get through. I've just described to you what I think is an irrefutable reality of British politics. You have a cabinet divided into two camps that are both correct but are disagreeing. Can you do that? Can you both be correct and yet contradict each other? It's like a political conundrum, this. It's like a sort of riddle. You've got two camps in the Conservative cabinet that are both correct and yet they are completely opposed to each other. Give me a call and say something intelligent on 034 or even just mildly amusing on 0345 6060 973. Listen, if you need a proper hook to hang on a contribution, then just go for something like, how the hell is this going to play out? What does this tell us about modern Britain? What does it say about Brexit? One cabinet, one party, two camps, both correct, completely opposed to each other. Do you know, it's almost beautiful now when you think about it as a sort of philosophical construct or as a rhetorical flourish. Two camps, one cabinet, both correct, both completely opposed to each other. Go on, make some sense of that for me now on 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And remember, the people who are desperately trying to get here, the people who are risking life and limb and handing over their life savings in the hope of coming here to get a job and build a better life, we're deporting them to Rwanda. 20 minutes after 12 is the time. Thank you for this. Wheelie has tweeted to say, please clip up that last bit from James, the I don't have a topic monologue, because it was brilliant. You're very kind. You can tell we're live. You can tell we're live. Very kind. Very modest. But also, you know, you can tell that we are also making it up as we go along, because there it is. Two constituents, two camps in the same cabinet, both correct about what's going to happen with regard to immigration. Increase it, racists are going to be furious. Don't increase it, job market's going to be even worse than it is already. Pete's in Bristol. Pete, what would you like to say?
Hi, afternoon. I just want to say this is actually incredibly intertwined with what you've been speaking about for the last hour with the pound. So my wife's Indian, and we talk about this immigration stuff quite often. Yeah. And like a big incentive to come to the UK was the pound. You earn in pounds, you can basically afford anything in a lot of countries.
Yeah.
And we're at a point now where, like, a collective of, like, the pound weakening. We have a naturally aging population because of like the war boom generation is retiring out, things like that, and things like lack of like labour force planning, basically filling those roles which are going. We are in like I'd say that like from all angles we are being attacked, and honestly, like the biggest winner out of Brexit is literally going to be countries like India, Philippines, stuff like that. We're going to be begging these people to come and fill these roles.
But they're going to be less likely to come now for the reasons you've just alluded to, because the pounds that they earn will not go anywhere near as far when they get sent back to countries of origin, if that's what they want to do.
I mean, it's not even like, I mean, she's a British citizen now, and, you know, we have our life here together, and it's actually fantastic. But the original options are, you know, UK, Canada, US, rest of Europe. Yeah. And like we used to have this advantage. People used to really want to come here. Yeah. And then self-inflicted Brexit, like I said, naturally aging population, and like the kind of...
so who's going to win then? Who's going to win between these two camps? The Home Secretary is insisting that immigration must fall even as Britain pushes for growth. I should have read that earlier. Sorry, I'll read that again because it is almost as... unlikely as defying gravity. The Home Secretary is insisting that immigration must fall even as Britain pushes for growth. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor are understood to believe that some sectors need more migrants. Who's going to win, do you think? Just like, you know, gut shot.
I don't think there's going to be many winners. And the big one for me is what you said about them reducing the requirement for like the English requirement, like English speaking, English language requirement stuff. Good Lord, does that reek of desperation? Like, if you speak to people that are not so positive on immigration, the one thing that bothers them, right, is like you can't communicate with someone, or there's like a language barrier or something like that, and they're just like, yeah, let's just get them in. They might even be able to speak English. You know.
Well, it was one of Farage's greatest hits, wasn't it? Complaining about people on a train not speaking English, even though his own children at the time would be speaking German at home to their mother.
Yeah, it's you know, it's like big dog whistle for them. I got one favour to ask, and you can mute me for asking this, but are we ready for a call to arms yet with the situation this country's in, or
what do you
are
mean?
We going to wait for the 5th Conservative PM?
What do you mean a call to arms? Do you mean protests on the street?
Yeah, I mean the real deal now. Like, are we waiting for the pound to get lower? Are we waiting for like the 5th Conservative PM in, you know, whatever it's been 6 years, or is everyone ready now? Because I've been ready for quite some time. I'm certainly not going to be calling for armed insurrection live on the radio, Pete, and I'm sure you're not either. But no, I mean we've got an electoral system, we've got a democratic framework in which our politics operates, and maybe this is back to me being a bit naive and a bit patriotic, but I have faith that it will eventually deliver us from this period of horror. And in fact, the distillation that we're discussing here is a really good example of the horror. You've got two camps in the same cabinet who are both simultaneously correct and completely opposed to each other. Wow. Thank you, Pete. Julie's in Doncaster. Julie, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hey.
I just wanted to say you're right that there are two camps, but only one of those camps is actually taking a position that's the best for the country. The other one position is only best for the Conservative Party.
Yes.
And the government are supposed to work in the best interest of the whole country, not just in the best interest of themselves. So it's quite clear which one of them, you know, should be acting on their instinct and their policies over the other one. I don't
yes
that
and
is
no.
What will happen.
Yes and no. I mean, all parties operate in a way that is most likely to retain power, to see them retain power. All governments do that. So they're not. It's not unique to the Conservatives to prioritise people who are going to put them in Downing Street above people who are not, perhaps. So I don't think that that's quite as clear cut as you suggest. But you're right. I mean, growth is good. Everybody agrees.
No, I mean, maybe they're not going to make that decision, but hopefully you would hope the British public will look and say, well, actually, they're not working in the best interest of the country.
No, but the British public voted for Brexit, which was the most self-damaging political decision that any country has ever taken. So, you know, unless there's been
but I think there are a proportion of people who voted for Brexit who've realised it's not what they thought it was going to be, and hopefully are coming back around.
Yes, precisely. They've realised it's not what they thought it was going to be, because now they're talking about letting more foreigners in. So do you see what I mean? That's why this is such an infernal issue. I can't believe it's like a spiral. It's like a corkscrew, this issue, because you're right. There are people who've fallen out of love with Brexit, some of them for sensible, decent reasons, as in they've realised they were conned. Some of them because the country isn't racist enough yet. And now you've got a prime minister, you've got a Brexity prime minister saying that we need more immigration.
But there is a cohort, and I know you've come across them before, and I certainly have, of people who are saying they didn't vote for Brexit because of immigration. So the immigration issue presumably isn't an issue for them. And what else about Brexit has
but you know and I know that whenever I ask them what it was they did vote for, they talk about, well, we were down to blue passports, really, by the time we stopped having those conversations, weren't we?
Well, I mean, if we had a general election tomorrow, those people would be able to put their money where their mouth is, and you know, on the current situation, if they didn't vote for it on the basis of immigration, presumably they wouldn't vote Conservative now, because I can't see how that the Tory government currently is helping anybody in any other area.
And yet, this is wonderful. It's almost like we rehearsed this in advance, Julie, because I now read to you the front page of the best-selling newspaper in the country. As Chancellor vows to defy critics and carry on cutting taxes, Kwasi's boost for families. So the propagandists are telling the people you're talking about that this fella is actually helping them, even as he isn't.
No. Well, my family doesn't feel like it's been boosted, James, that's for
well,
sure.
mine does, and that's what I was cross about on Friday. I've had, it was a magnificent mini budget for people in my kind of situation, but not for you. And my politics are that I will vote for a party that will increase the top tax rate that I pay. 12:27 is the time. Zach's in Watford. Zach, what would you like to say?
Afternoon, James. Hello. I just wanted to draw the comparison between the Conservative Party at the moment, who seem to be fighting amongst themselves and not really pulling in any coherent direction, with the Donald Trump supporters during the last election in America shouting "stop the count" and simultaneously shouting "count the votes" in different parts of the country.
Where they thought they were doing well, stop it. Where they thought they were doing badly, well, whichever way round it was. You're right, there was a sort of dissonance, there was a contradiction, and the same camp calling for completely different outcomes. You're right, I don't know it's much help in the great scheme of things to remind us of that. Is it, or are you just saying that there is actually no uniting force for these people?
I think it's the sign of a party that's been led by, you know, obviously it's financial backers. And like you said before, I think a party's quite entitled to take the views of the people that financially support it, you know, and obviously will help them and gain power ultimately. But I think, unfortunately, given, you know, as we've seen with the most recent budget, the complete disregard for any sort of, you know, rigorous legislation on how much greed people can exploit in this country. I think when you allow people like that to dictate your policy, ultimately you will lose sight of the, you know, the fundamentals of what your party
also, there's a
may have
genie
been
here.
built on.
There's a genie here, and once it's out of the bottle, once you have normalised voting, encouraging people to vote to make their lives worse on the grounds that there will be fewer foreigners around, which both Trump did that as well. Brexit was about that. Johnson jumped on that particularly ugly bandwagon. Theresa May, of course, instigated the hostile environment. Truss and Kwarteng, oddly, are swimming away from that position because they're looking at the numbers and knowing they don't work. Braverman and Badenoch are not the Prime Minister, although both tried to be, or the Chancellor of the Exchequer, so they can continue to fan those flames. They can continue to pursue the people who will still be minded to vote against their own interests in order to have fewer foreigners around. What an absolute mess. Thank you, Zach. It's 12:30. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines. 12:33 is the time, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Should we summon the Usherwood? Will he be able to hear us from Liverpool? Are you sure? God, he's got ears like a bat, that boy. Summon the Usherwood! We are broadcasting nationally, I suppose. In fact, internationally. This is my favourite text of the day from Chris, although it came in at 10 to 12, so he may have sauntered off to the bar. I'm sitting around a swimming pool in Croatia, James, and all I can hear are your dulcet tones. Is there no escape? Well, I know you're secretly delighted that one of your fellow tourists is possessed of such impeccable taste that they have me on poolside in Croatia. I take a call and then hopefully Theo Usherwood will be here. Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, is just winding up her speech to the Labour conference in Liverpool. We're talking about a bizarre battle in the British Cabinet, which sees two camps being both simultaneously correct and completely opposed to each other. We need more immigration, says the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. We need less immigration, says the Home Secretary. For very different reasons, but both reasons are correct. Clement's in Walthamstow. Clement, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi James. Good day. I just wanted to give my take on the topic of immigration. What happened is I've been working 4 years in the NHS.
Yes.
And due to no fault of mine, my derivative rights was taken away from me because of the EU referendum vote.
Okay.
And I was caught with my pants down, so I had to make an emergency application.
So you're a citizen of another European country, are you?
No, actually, I was actually here taking care of a British citizen, and because of that, I was granted derivative rights to remain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What happened is, long story short, is that I had to make an application. I made the application within the time frame that the immigration services told me to, and they responded after my visa had expired.
Oh.
Now I am willing to work, and because of the blueprint and the red tape, I can't. I've been home for the past couple of months. And now they're saying I have to make an application, 4,500. So imagine the amount of people that facing the same situation that I am in right now in Britain who are willing to work and can't because of the fine print and the cost. No one is speaking about the cost of these applications as well.
Well, we have a bit, but you're right, not as often as we could have done and possibly should have done. So the Home Office, and this is, of course, the place where Priti Patel was plying her trade until relatively recently, the Home Office appears to be actually putting up obstacles to workers like you.
Of course. And think about it, how much of people are in the same position like me, who are willing to work, who were working, and who are, of course, in the NHS is understaffed. So when I listen to these politicians and them, I sometimes can't believe the things that are coming out of their mouths.
You and me both, Clement. You and me both.
I am living it. I am facing it right now. I have a family of 5 to support.
Yeah.
And we don't know what, when, or where, or how the next meal. And it's frustrating to hear these people come up and say, "Oh, quote these statistics," and I don't know where and they're getting these statistics from.
No, I think it's ideology, isn't it? They're pushing you towards to leaving. I don't know whether that's too cynical. I hope, obviously, that you don't. But there's going to come a point where you can't afford to stay in this limbo, isn't there?
Exactly, and that's what it comes down to, And I've been here a number of years, almost 15 years. My I have kids that went through school, and it's hard. It's hard for me to stand now and just sit and wait. And then I hear all these things: NHS crisis, this crisis. But it have people here who are willing to work,
and then they won't.
I say, because of the cost of these applications. Just the cost of loan. And imagine you're not working, you're not employed. How are you going to pay 4,500 for application?
I know, and this. At the other end, the illegal end of it, as well as reports today from Indonesia about people paying agents there with promises of jobs here. So, we're just not going to attract people by making it so unpleasant and so difficult. What are you going to do? How much longer can you hang on for, if you don't mind me asking?
Listen to me. Right now, we are living hand to mouth.
Oh, mate.
And it's hard to look at my kids and stay strong, because it's not like I'm here and I receive benefit. I have never claimed benefits for any of my kids. My wife, we have never claimed any benefits. We pay for our care. We do everything that the people come on the radio and try to put us down for doing. Migrants. We are scroungers. We are this. We try to avoid as much help as possible from the British government, and we've been getting on.
Yeah.
We've getting on. It's not like but to see now that I'm willing to work and can't.
And you are one of the people Suella Braverman is talking about when she says immigration must fall, even as Britain pushes for growth. She doesn't want you here.
Yeah, exactly. And
You know, most of us do. You know, this is a warm and welcoming country that's just going through a little bit of an identity crisis at the moment.
I'll tell you something,
Go on.
James. The thing what I realize about this country, racism, bigotry, and people who hold those type of views are in a minority. They just have the public forum to spew their garbage. I deal with people because, as I say, I worked in the NHS for 4 years. I worked through the COVID. I deal with people face to face. I interact with people. And the number of experiences I've had since I've here was none of them I could say were particularly negative.
Sure.
You know, so I when I hear people like Nigel Farage and the people who hold those types of ideology, it don't faze me because I can see for myself, you know, but to know that you're not wanted in a place where you know you just want to make a living in it. That's all. It's just a living, you know.
I hear you. I hope you get some progress soon. I hope you get some answers soon. Let us know. I mean, we could put a call in to the Home Office, find out what's going on, see if that can help at all. It probably won't, Clement. I don't want to give you any undue or misplaced hopes, but sometimes a little bit of media attention can just grease the wheels. But no, there it is. I mean, there it is. A voice of someone. Experienced, worked in the NHS for 4 years. Obstacles at the Home Office mean he's not working there now. So not only are we down a member of staff, a committed, caring member of staff, we're also looking at a family man feeling genuine fear about how he's going to provide for his family. That's it. I mean, you know, everybody knew what they were voting for, didn't they? Yeah, right. Theo Usherwood is in Liverpool.
I'm here because it is Economy Day for the Labour Party conference. We've had speeches from Ed Miliband and Rachel Reeves. In fact, it's probably best worth starting with the Shadow Business Secretary's speech. Again, like everybody here, talking about the collapse of the British pound against the dollar overnight.
If you've seen the news this morning, it's clear the Tories may believe in the markets, but even the markets no longer believe in the Tories. And friends, we owe it to the country to defeat this lot at the next general election.
That was Ed Miliband, James. He was, of course, the warm-up act for Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor here. And you got the impression that actually Rachel Reeves had sort of written a couple of paragraphs which had been tacked on to the front of her speech, given the news that the pound had fallen to its lowest ever level against the dollar, below 1.04. And she was trying to explain to those in the hall and those beyond the hall, those in the country tuning in either now or will be hearing from Rachel Reeves later, exactly what it meant in terms of what can the Bank of England do now. It can put up interest rates, of course, and what that will mean for your bills.
The cost of government borrowing is up. That means that more taxpayers' money will go into paying the interest on our government debt. And in turn, that means the cost of borrowing for working people will now go up too, with higher mortgage repayments for families. And all for what? Not to invest in the industries of the future, not for our NHS, and not for our schools, but for tax cuts for the wealthiest. A return to trickle-down economics, an idea that has been tried, has been tested, and has failed.
Now, I did some rough numbers actually just before joining you, James. So 2 years ago, 2020, you could get an interest rate, 2 years fixed rate. Let's say the amount you want to borrow is £400,000 over 30 years. And your repayments, if you had an interest rate, which was typical about 1.2%, would be £1,300 a month. This year, right now, I had a look, you can get an interest rate of about 4.25%. Your monthly repayment just shy of £2,000. And many economists have been talking this morning about interest rates having to go up to as high as 6%. If that happens in 2024, your monthly repayments are going to be £2,500. So the point that Rachel Reeves is making is that this mini budget that we had, because it has seemingly spooked the markets and we've seen the collapse in the pound, the reality for millions of people is that their monthly outgoings, their disposable income, is going to shrink dramatically because they're going to be spending so much money on their mortgage repayment costs. And Rachel Reeves trying to, and this is something that she's done previously and Keir Starmer has repeatedly tried to do, to pitch the Labour Party as being the party which, beyond here at the conference here in Liverpool, can represent Conservative voters, whether they be in the south of England, whether they be first-time Conservative voters in 2019 in the Red Wall seats, and be the party, and Labour can be, in her view, the party of government.
A zero carbon economy, made right here, made in Britain. It is time for a government that is on your side, and that government is a Labour government.
Rachel Reeves, I should say, James, has also mentioned, I'm sure we'll be talking about it later, a new minimum wage that reflects the cost of living. Now, you'll remember from last year's conference there was a row between the left of the party, who wanted a £15 minimum wage, and Keir Starmer, who was rather more reticent about that because, of course, the impact it would have on employers being able to take people on. But Rachel Reeves seemingly opening the door now to a higher minimum wage. Where it will be set, we still don't know. She didn't detail that in her speech.
Gone down very well, though.
It has gone down well.
Which is, and also quite uplifting, which is not something people have associated with Rachel Reeves previously.
No, and it was solid. So
yeah.
What you have now, James, and this seems where Labour are trying to drive a wedge between the Tories and the electorate, is you have last week's mini budget, and the Tories have always pitched themselves as being strong on the economy, that this is their, it's one of their, it's a home fixture for them. But by pressing ahead with the tax cuts on Friday, and then Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor, doubling down yesterday and saying that he'd want to introduce more tax cuts in the November budget, the markets, and as Ed Miliband said, seem to no longer have faith in the Conservative government. And what Rachel Reeves is trying to do, and you heard from a solid performance from the Shadow Chancellor there, is to say, actually, the Labour Party, with the economy, with your finances and your and bread and butter, just talking about your personal finances around the kitchen table, excuse the double pun, but the point is, she's making if you trust Labour, the Labour Party can be a safe pair of hands with the economy, and that's the message she's trying to get out.
Former Bank of England economist, isn't she?
Yes, yeah, that does come with a degree of expertise as well.
I think we're short of time to talk here, I mean, at the other end of the country, about letters of no confidence already being submitted about the current Prime Minister, Liz Truss. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, I think the benchmark that Tory MPs seem to be setting themselves, and I've been in touch with a few who are fairly reticent to go on the record, but the benchmark they seem to be setting themselves is parity with the dollar. If the pound goes below parity with the dollar, you're going to see a flood of letters go in, and that could potentially spark a leadership challenge. We were discussing it last Friday, James. It was easy for me to come to listen to what was being said in the House of Commons, and just to hear the real discontent. It was put across in a fairly. It was very polite, it was very respectful, but there were concerns from those on the Conservative backbenches who have a background in business, who have a background in economics, who are significantly worried about the stance that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have taken and the risks that they've taken. And in the end, you can't buy off market confidence. You can't simply say to the markets, you need to have confidence in what we're doing and you need to stop shorting the pound. It doesn't work like that. You have to make the case with the policies that you implement, and at the moment the government isn't simply doing enough to instill that confidence within the market that makes investors think, actually, we want to invest in Britain.
Theo Ashford, take care. How long are you up there for?
Till Wednesday.
Okay, well, look after yourself. Don't go to any of those raucous parties. Theo Ashford, LBC's political editor, live from the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. I think someone's going to have to say this, that Rishi, I think I've already said it, but Rishi Sunak during those leadership debates predicted pretty much every single syllable of what's happening now. Two things occurred to me. This is also what we were told would happen if the Labour Party had won the election in 2019. Could you imagine how the right-wing newspapers like the Daily Mail and the Daily Express in particular would be reacting now if the pound was heading towards parity with the dollar as a direct consequence of policy decisions taken by a Labour leader or a Labour chancellor. That's point one. And point two is Rishi Sunak literally described this. He literally said, borrowing your way out of inflation isn't a plan, it's a fairy tale. It's day two, if you exclude the weekend from proceedings, but it's not looking great. It's 12:50. It is 12:53, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we've been a little hard on Liz Truss perhaps today. She does seem to be genuinely committed to growth, and she certainly does seem to understand some of the key infrastructure that a country needs in order to pursue growth. I was just thinking about an exchange at PMQs the other day when Nick Fletcher, the MP for Don Valley, asked her a question about Doncaster Sheffield Airport.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate my honourable friend for the position as Prime Minister, but I'd also like to thank her for the support of my campaign to keep Doncaster Sheffield Airport open. She now helped further right into South Yorkshire Mayor Oliver Coppard and Peel Holdings Chairman John Whittaker to remind them of their powers, duties and responsibilities to the people of South Yorkshire and beyond. And will she use the full weight of her office on these decision makers so as to keep our Doncaster Sheffield Airport open?
Well, regional airports, including the Doncaster Sheffield Airport, are a vital part of our economic growth. And what I will make sure is that the new Transport Secretary is immediately onto this issue. I know she is, I can tell. Look, she's already contacting the people in Doncaster and Sheffield to make sure we do protect this airport and we protect that vital infrastructure and connectivity that helps our economy grow.
That's fairly unequivocal. Charlotte Lynch is with me. A bit early, isn't it, really, to be catching up on Liz Truss's promise to save Doncaster Sheffield Airport?
It's just been confirmed that Doncaster Sheffield Airport is going to close. They're going to wind down operations from the 31st of October. So the Peel Group, which owns the airport, has said it's not financially viable, and from the end of October it will begin winding down its services. Now, this is an airport that flies to some of the biggest, most popular holiday destinations: Mallorca, Gran Canaria, Bulgaria, serving around 1 million people a year. Its record was 1.3 million in 2017. It employs 800 people, and all of their jobs are at risk. Now, the Peel Group's been reviewing the business model since July. They say they've been in weekly discussions with the Department for Transport, as well as Doncaster Council and the devolved combined authority in South Yorkshire. And they say that none of those discussions have delivered any tangible results. Now, the Department for Transport's issued a brief statement saying the decision's incredibly disappointing, and they strongly encourage local leaders and the Peel Group to work together to find a solution for the site. As for Conservative MP Nick Fletcher, who you heard asking that question there, he's been quiet on this so far. We've, of course, requested his response, but he will have to explain this to his constituents because he has been relentlessly campaigning to save the airport.
But I just played that clip, and it said, the Prime Minister said that Anne-Marie Trevelyan, the new Transport Secretary, was already on the phone. I mean, wheels were moving.
The Peel Group said it has been in weekly discussions with the Department for Transport since July, but none of them have delivered any results. And as I say, that statement from the Department for Transport has encouraged local leaders, and it's a devolved combined authority in South Yorkshire, headed up by the Labour Mayor for South Yorkshire, and it's their responsibility to discuss with the Peel Group and come up with a solution.
And it will start winding down at the end of October. Briefly, Charlotte, people are just flying less. What's the actual big context? Is it
of course, COVID was a huge problem financially for the aviation industry, and the support.
And they just haven't managed to bounce back.
Exactly right.
Holy moly. Well, there you go. 1 PMQ's in. Her first promise, broken. It's going well. And I would just stress, if you are looking around for reasons to be cheerful, I believe the pound is still outperforming the Madagascar Naira, which is the only currency out of the 151 currencies that Bloomberg currently tracks that is performing worse than sterling at the moment. So the Madagascar Naira, which means we can attract all these workers that we need from Madagascar, because their money will go further back in Madagascar. Oh, never mind. That's almost it from me for another day. That story about immigration is one to which I suspect we'll return, because I stumbled across a thing of rhetorical beauty, Sheila Fogarty, earlier, when I identified two camps in the same cabinet, both arguing completely opposite points, but both completely correct. The Home Secretary is right to worry that they will alienate an awful lot of supporters if they bring in more immigrants. And the Prime Minister is right to worry that they will jeopardise growth if they don't bring in more immigrants.
Well,
how about
that particular issue is true mind-bending, post-Brexit mind-bending.
Isn't it?
Nonsense, isn't it? Yeah, definitely.
It all is.
It all is. Are we done? Are we ready? Yes.
Well, I can do another 16 seconds if you want. I've got a bit of material prepared, but I'm happy.
I was going to say that Madagascar thing sounded like an answer to a Mystery Hour question.
It is.
It is Monday, isn't it? It's not Thursday.
No, the Madagascar area. Round of applause for Sheila Fogarty.
Thank you. I'm in. I'm off. I'm running. Thank you. 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 I'm off. I'm